구원해준 나의 천사 나의 세상 난 이상 새 고향이 널 만나러
The street outside was calm, carrying only the soft hum of distant traffic and the cool breath of night. But the moment Ryan and Jimin stepped into the party, the stillness dissolved. The air thickened with laughter, music, and the restless thrum of voices. It felt as though the walls themselves pulsed with the rhythm of the music. Lights flashed across the room, dancing on faces half lit in red and gold. Jimin's eyes swept the crowd, focused yet unsettled. "Where are they?" he asked, his voice a ripple in the chaos. Ryan's gaze followed his, searching past swaying silhouettes and raised glasses. "Must be here or there," she said, pointing toward the rowdy group near the center, where energy rose like heat. Together they moved forward, their steps weaving through the fragments of chatter and song. Halfway across the room, Ryan faltered. Her sleigh Her heel slipped against the polished floor, and for a moment gravity tugged at her. She steadied herself quickly, fingers gripping Jimin's arm. He caught her movement immediately, his head tilting slightly as he let out a breath. "You really had to wear these when they do not even let you walk properly?" His voice carried a sharp edge, but beneath it hid a note of concern that refused to vanish. Ryan glanced at him, then toward the girls nearby in matching heels. "Look at them, they are wearing it too," she whispered, her words defensive yet fragile. Jimin scoffed softly, shaking his head, lips tucking in disapproval. "Come out of your peer pressure," he muttered under his breath, the words rolling off with quiet certainty. His comment struck like truth, simple and undeniable. Ryan pressed her lips together, zipping them shut as though answering might unravel her pride. Deep down, she knew she had not wanted these heels tonight. They pinched her with every step, but still she wore them. When Ryan finally reached her friends, they welcomed her with a group hug. Laughter spilling in the air. Jimin, reserved as ever, shook their hands with a faint smile that barely touched his lips. Drinks were offered, and Ryan, swept in the mood, was already swaying lightly on her heels. Jimin's eyes wandered across the room, restless, before they inevitably found her again. His gaze trailed down, lingering on her feet. A flush of light red had begun spreading across her ankles, skin tightening under the sharp press of heels. Yet Ryan danced on, pretending not to notice. He shook his head, looking away, but his eyes greeted him, finding her again in the blur of lights. This time she was walking toward him, her smile bright, her hand reaching. "Dance with me," she said softly. Jimin shook his head in refusal. "Please," she whispered, her voice almost playful, almost pleading. Jimin sighed, giving in, and placed his hand on hers. They swayed together gently, her smile luminous as she looked up at him. "Smile a little," she teased. His expression remained steady, his eyes instead lowering toward her heels. "You might get hurt," he murmured, his tone carrying weight. Ryan followed his gaze down, brushing it off with a laugh. "No," she winced mid-sentence, as her ankle twisted beneath her. In one sharp second her body crumpled. and the floor rushed to meet her. Jimin crouched beside her instantly, his voice biting yet filled with worry. I told you, stupid. She tried to force a smile, whispering, I am fine, but as she gripped his arm and attempted to rise, her body faltered again, her strength collapsing beneath the pain. You said you are fine, he muttered, his gaze fixed on her trembling form. She looked up at him, then her eyes wet without her knowing, tears glistening under the dim party light. Jimin, she breathed, the sound breaking against her pain. His sigh was heavy, resigned. Let's go, he said at last, slipping on her arm firmly around her waist. He lifted her gently, steadying her against his side. Wyan leaned into him as if gravity itself demanded it. Behind them, her fans remained unaware, lost in music and chatter. Without waiting, Jimin guided her out of the crowd, away from the pulsing lights and careless laughter. The doors opened, and suddenly they were back on the quiet street, the night air cool against their skin, silence replacing the noise they had left behind. Jimin guided Wei to the side bench along the pavement, his hand steady at her arm until she sat. Without hesitation, he crouched before her, eyes dropping to her ankle. His fingers carefully slipped her heels away, his silence louder than words. She hissed at the sting, her breath sharp, tears spilling down her cheeks before she could hide them. Jimin looked up briefly, his eyes shadowed with concern, then back down again. Sorry, she whispered, her voice small, trembling as she shuffled. With a sudden movement, he removed both heels and tossed them aside. They clattered against the pavement, expensive leather now worthless in his eyes. Wayan gasped at the sound but said nothing. She could not when Jimin's face was carved with focus. His hand gently caressed her swollen ankle, the pressure making her clamp hand over her mouth to hold back the scream rising in her throat. Relax, he murmured, steady and low. His gaze shifted, scanning the street. Wait here, I'll be back. Her heart pounded as he disappeared into the shadows, leaving her alone with the echo of her pain and the weight of the night. She swallowed hard, glancing around nervously until his figure reappeared, breathless, an ice pack clenched in his hand. Crouching again, he pressed the coal firmly to her spring. She flinched, tears stinging her lashes, but he did not let go. The eyes stayed there, steady, his patience unwavering. Minutes stretched until he finally rose, slipping his phone from his pocket. Thank you, Wine whispered, her voice soft, her cheeks still damp from tears long shed. He gave her a brief look, unreadable, then returned her gaze to the screen. I'll book a taxi, he said, but fate had other plans. The sky cracked open, releasing a downpour without warning. Heavy rain lashed the street, fierce and merciless. Within seconds, both were drenched. Jimin's hand caught hers, pulling her toward a nearby shed. Their hurried footsteps splashing against the rain soaked pavement. The rain drummed hard against the roof of the shed, each drop echoing like a warning. Clement's phone glowed in his hand as he tried again and again, but every taxi cancelled, leaving them stranded. Ryan shifted uncomfortably, pain twisting deeper into her ankle. Minutes felt heavy, the cold air sinking through her skin. Jimin finally exhaled in relief when a driver answered. Hello, he said quickly. We are next to the pub, but the response on the other and made his eyes widen in disbelief. That's 3 streets away, and we are stuck in the rain, he muttered, gaze flicking upward at Ryan, whose face was drawn with pain. He clenched his jaw and then spoke to the phone. Okay, wait there. The call ended, silence hanging like a fog. Jimin looked at her, voice steady yet firm. We have to go there. Ryan's eyes widened, disbelief painted across her expression. I don't think I can, but before her protest was complete, his arms slipped beneath her, lifting her effortlessly into the rain. Her breath caught, shock stealing her words. Bridal style, he held her as though she weighed nothing, his steps strong and deliberate against the flooded street. Wine instantly buried her face into the curve of his neck, hiding from the storm. One of her hands pressed gently over his head, shielding his face from the pounding rain, while the other arm wrapped tightly around his neck. His warmth was an anchor, steady against the chaos, and for the first time tonight she let herself lean on him completely.